Welcome to another episode of our Small Business Survival Series. I'm Nancy Smith, Executive Director with the Shawano Country Chamber of Commerce. And today I have with me Greg Gauthier, who is a partner with Foxwood Associates. So welcome, Greg.
Thank you, Nancy. It's great to be your guest.
Yes. So I read an article you wrote in the Business News titled, "This Crisis Might Have Some Silver Linings." So I really enjoyed the insight and the optimism in that article. And so we all could use some of that right now, some insight, optimism. So I would just like you to kind of share information about what you had in there. So you listed 5 areas where we can find positivity during this crisis. And the first area you mentioned was responsiveness to change and how we've all had to pivot so quickly during this. So can you share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, certainly. You know, I think we learn a lot about ourselves when we're put in really difficult and uncomfortable situations. And one thing that we learn about ourselves is that I think we're much more resilient and much more responsive when we have to than when we're left to ourselves to change. And I think it's natural. We all resist change. We're a little skeptical about whether things work. And I think, you know, just as humans, we kind of seek out the path of least resistance. And sometimes these things come along and we don't have a choice. And then when we're in those, it's when we discover capabilities. And certainly in this situation, if you recall back to those first 2 or 3 weeks, there was a change coming out every day from the governor's office, from the CDC, and businesses were working almost overtime to put together a policy in one day, only to have to change it the next day because something new happened. And you know what I found, you know, that was difficult work and that was hard, but the attitude that people had through that was just an attitude of can-do, an attitude of resilience. They didn't have the option. They needed to keep up with it. And then about 3 weeks into that, the dust started to settle. The changes became fewer. And I began to wonder if we can respond that quickly as we did to the mandates that were thrust upon us, how quickly could we respond if maybe we wanted to bring a new product to market, or we had to respond to a competitor threat, or to do something that was not initiated outside of us, but from inside. And while in the past that would have all been so difficult to do, at least now we had the evidence that we're capable of doing it. We couldn't use that as an excuse any longer.
Yeah, I've heard the saying, you don't let a good crisis go to waste. Right? So this is our opportunity. So another silver lining you mentioned kind of goes hand in hand with responsiveness, and that's creativity and adaptability. And businesses have been forced to get very creative during all this, and they need to adapt to this whole new world. And that's kind of what you were talking about that. So talk about the importance of that.
Yeah. Like in business, like in life, sometimes creativity and energy comes out of the toughest situations we're in. When survival is on the line, we can get really creative and do a lot of things we never thought were possible. And in these situations, we saw particularly Main Street businesses, retail businesses in particular, who were told not to be open. They had to close their doors. They couldn't take customers. And if somebody would have just asked them theoretically one time outside of this crisis, so what do you think you would do if you couldn't have customers? They'd say, well, we'd be out of business. And yet when they had to do it, they said, no, we're not going to be out of business. We're going to figure out a way to do it. And from for-profit businesses to churches and nonprofits, not only did I think I saw a great deal of creativity come from the business, but I saw an outpouring of support from the community, from customers, from church members, from contributors and volunteers and nonprofit organizations to do what they could also to sustain and see those businesses through. So there was just coming together of both the consumer and the public and the business itself to make sure that those institutions that maybe we might not give the same attention to when all things are good, when the tide turned, we stuck in there, we hung together, and we made sure to the best of our ability that those businesses who had worked hard to get to where they are going to have the opportunity to have a future and have sunshine again on their sidewalks.
Right. And I think any technology we've been pushed into, like Zoom meetings and like getting online for our businesses, they need to stick with that. I heard a business recently say, I can't wait until we're done with all this so I can, get offline,
Yeah,
stop selling online. I said, no, 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 you will need to continue to
absolutely.
do that. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I'm old enough to have gone through a number of economic recessions, and there were two types of businesses that I saw go through those recessions. There was the first type of business that would say, let's just hunker down and wait till this is over and things return to normal. And then there's the others that would start off with the assumption that we may never have an old normal. We're just going to have to figure out how to adapt to the new normal. And I think that's sorted out in many regards, those that made it and those that didn't. You used a kind of a version of an often used phrase of mine, and that's, it's a shame to waste a good recession. And that means that when that kind of adversity comes upon us, and often it's something we can't control. It happens, there's a world crisis. In this case, there's a virus, and we don't get to decide the circumstances. It just happens, and we're there, and we have to deal with it. I think the attitude that says we're just going to figure out what it takes, and we're going to learn how to survive and thrive, not just survive, not how do we just get through it and be no better off, because wouldn't that be a terrible thing to think about? We go through all this hard work and this pain and this suffering that we're going through as business leaders, and if we only come out the side and we're only as good as we went into it, what a shame, all that we went through, and to be no better off. So to your point, I think it's really important that companies that have discovered things about themselves, maybe selling to a new market online through a channel they've never used before, what a great new revenue stream and opportunity that's going to be. Maybe the takeout businesses that I've seen, I wonder if the companies had takeout business that vigorous prior to this. My guess is they've just discovered perhaps a new opportunity for the business, and it'll be an add-on when all of those customers come back to the store, but now they have new revenue channels through takeout or through online selling that they didn't have before. This could really be a great opportunity if we look at this as an opportunity. And yeah, it's painful and it's difficult. That part we don't get to choose. Let them choose to use that situation to be better when we're through. It's about our attitude and our response. There's that saying that I don't get to choose my circumstances, but I get to choose 100% of my response to the circumstances. And I think that sums up what we're talking about here.
exactly. And customers have changed also. Their behavior has changed. And I think that change is going to go on for quite some time. So I think what you're talking about, businesses to sit back and think, what makes sense now for me to be offering as a product, and how should I be offering it? So they need to be asking themselves those questions.
Yeah, not only the product itself, but the delivery vehicle of the product. That conversation about in-store versus online. There's a pretty robust revenue channel there because we've figured things out. And as I see it in myself, the things I'm buying online, I'm buying local, or we're going to pick up local. To some extent, that's new. We didn't do it to the same extent that we're doing it now. I see us doing a lot more in the future, because we've kind of grooved into a new pattern. And you made the point, and this interview is a great example. You made the point that also the way we do business has changed. I've gotten so accustomed to doing Zoom meetings now. When somebody calls and wants to meet in purpose, I'm kind of bummed out, because I rather like sitting at my desk and not having to drive somewhere. I had to go down to the place I get oil changes in my car just to make sure that there's some business, because I'm not getting there that often. And we've just all found so many new ways to do business, and some of those we really like. And so how we do meetings, how we manage our employees, who can work from home and who can't. I mean, it wasn't 6 months ago we said, oh no, we can't have that policy because productivity would just drop off the earth. Well, we found the completely opposite. That not only are our employees productive, but they're trustworthy, they're loyal. I mean, we found a completely different response to working at home than what we would have thought it was going to be prior to doing it. And I think that's all positive and good. So good things are coming out of this.
Yeah, I think some people are more productive working from home than from the office.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The final one I want to ask you about that you highlighted in your article as a silver lining was finding better balance. So if there's one takeaway from this crisis, I hope the people coming out of this at least take the time to appreciate, what they have and understand how things can change in an instant. So what does finding better balance mean to you?
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of a pet issue for me. I'm a big advocate about drawing a really hard line between work and home. And I wrote an article for the Business News, it probably was 5 years ago or so, when, again, being a little older, I could reminisce and wax fondly about the days when I had a wire in basket on my desk, and my phone was tethered by a cord to the wall. And how that forced separation. At the end of the day, when I got up and left the office, I didn't take my in basket with me, nor did I unplug the phone and take it home. I remember those days, and people that have been around that long remember that if you ever got a call from the office, it was serious. Something very, very serious happened. So the technology then forced that separation. The introduction of cell phones has really enabled us to never be off the clock. And we've lost that hard line between work and home. And I think we've lost it at the expense of family time, at the expense of just leisure, enjoying hobbies, doing things. I'm a stickler with my clients about vacation. I mean, they hear from me all the time that an employee's vacation, you ought to certainly not call them and don't expect them to take emails. And I've been around companies who have gone so far as to disable or, disable the employee's email while they're on vacation to make sure that that separation is there, because it's healthy. It's healthy for the individual, but it's also healthy for the company. If we don't have the systems and the backups and the people in place to be able to fill in for somebody while they're gone, then we've got a vulnerability in our organization. Just piling work up on somebody's desk until they get back is certainly not serving an employee the way they ought to be served. We need to figure out ways in which that work continues to occur smoothly, maybe a little less productive, I get that, but certainly work continues to go on in the absence of an individual. I think that strengthens the individual, it strengthens the company. I think it creates engagement, loyalty on the part of the employees, and it's really an important issue. This crisis has forced that. People working from home, they can turn off their computer now and they are disconnected. And that's happened, it's not, we haven't disconnected totally, and that's okay, but people have disconnected a lot more. And because we couldn't go somewhere, we didn't have to run around with the kids a lot of times. We stayed home and we found games and we found activities, and we Zoomed with grandparents and other relatives. And I think we grew closer as individuals and families, and we improved our relationship with our employer because we were forced into the situation we're in.
Yeah, and I hope that continues. And it's interesting how people tended to be doing the same things. Like apparently there was a lot of baking going on.
Yeah.
The flour was gone. I've been looking for yeast in the grocery store for months now and can't find it.
Yeah.
Puzzles, you couldn't find puzzles for sale anywhere. So it's interesting how those very basic activities were bringing families together.
And my final word would be just like yours was, I hope that we can find some balance, a new balance. I'm not about throwing out the technology, certainly, but that we can find a new balance with it. If we don't, at least we ought to celebrate this period of time, this period of 3 to 6 months or so, when our lives were tipped upside down and we discovered something new about ourselves. We discovered our capability. We discovered talents and interests. We resurrected hobbies, perhaps. The flour is gone, baking occurred for a while, and I think that's a good thing. So I would hope that some of that would sustain, but if not, for a period of time, we probably were better off than had it not happened at all.
We got to unplug once in a while, and hopefully, people will appreciate, what they have going forward, and we'll take the time to understand that and celebrate it. I think it's really, really important. So. Yeah. Greg, thank you so much for your time. Do you have anything else you would like to share with our businesses?
I'm so proud of our businesses. I'm so proud of what the Shawano Chamber has done. I'm so proud of the programs that I saw and the hard work that I saw businesses putting in. I hope their days are getting easier. Maybe for some it won't, but for the majority, better days are coming. And I believe and I hope for their sake that what they've been through is going to make them stronger, more resilient, and I hope build a brighter future for them and their families, and that entrepreneurial venture that they've been on with their own company.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your optimism. It's very much appreciated. And thank you all for joining us again for this episode of our Small Business Survival Series. See you next time.